Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for coming for the last session of the day. I know that you're excited about the party that's to follow, and this will just get you more fired up in advance. So my name's Alvin Slavic. I am the lead for the R&D team in our Melbourne office, at which we do a lot of the Survey123 development work. To my left is Ismail Civite, and we'll... Anyone know Ismail? Anyone seen him before? Some people, maybe. And we have Erwin over here as well, who's making a guest appearance from the App Studio team. So, why do we want to extend Survey123 when it's such a wonderful product? There's nothing at all that any of you could possibly think of that we haven't thought of ourselves. Isn't that right? Well, maybe not. Maybe there's a few things still that we need to go and develop. So we've heard from you, there's lots of things that you want to go and do that Survey doesn't do out of the box. Even though the smart forms are smart, you want to make them smarter. Even though it fits into your workflows, you want to make it more focused. And so there's a whole bunch of reasons of why you want to go and extend Survey123. And that's great, because that means it's working in your organisations, and it means that you're looking for ways to make it integrate better and fit better and make you more productive, more efficient, whatever it is that you go out and do with it, which is good. So since we created Survey123, we didn't have much of an extensibility story in the early days. And we'll cover a little bit of it, some of what we've had shortly. But since it started, you've been able to extend it in lots of different ways. We all know about being able to design forms and what we've been able to do within forms. Outside of the forms themselves, we've added ability to create themes. You've used app linking to link it between applications using app callbacks. We're introducing the ability, and some of you are already doing it, to embed surveys into your own websites. We've seen people embed surveys into dashboards today. We saw a really good example of what people have been able to go and do with it. We have the Python API, we have a JavaScript API as well for it, and a lot of you have probably come and seen the webhook stuff, which has been really popular. So they're the things that you've already seen. We're not going to spend any time on those topics. The ones that we are going to spend a lot of time on are the two that are in yellow on the screen and a little bit on the blue, because that's actually been our story to date. So without any further ado, we're going to start off with JavaScript functions. And Ismail's going to show us what this is all about, but essentially what you've been telling us is that although you can do lots with XLS form and with expressions in surveys, you want to do more. More functions, more complex implementation of logic and business logic going on inside the form. So let's have a look at how we can actually go and do that. So I'm going to switch over to Ismail's machine. That's you, I think.
Yep. Thank you, Alvin. So you can extend Survey123 with JavaScript, with plain JavaScript. You cannot do a lot of things, but we will describe some that could be of your interest. Some context first. You can use custom logic in the pull data function. How many of you are familiar with pull data in XLS forms? Okay. We use pull data to do lookup kind of searches on CSV files. We use pull data to get EXIF information from a photo, right? We use pull data to get information from a geopoint object. Turns out that you can use pull data to invoke a custom JavaScript function. And what that JavaScript function does is up to you. You can use this technique to do many things. For example, you can use it for calculations. In JavaScript, you can create complex models that you could barely really model within XLS form expressions. You can use it also for data validation or to improve your relevant statements. I'll give you a demonstration of some of the different things that you can do. Okay, so now you are looking at my...
No, not yet.
3 and 5.
Yep.
There you go. So I'm going to launch Survey, and here I'm going to start with, this one is easy. This is kind of a tutorial kind of thing. Get day of the week. You have a date question at the top, and at the bottom you have a calculation that returns the day of the week, right? So say you pick Saturday, this is going to run a validation function and pop a message that says you need to pick a day that is not on the weekend. You could certainly do this with XLS forms. Yeah, you could do it. It's way too complicated. You can use the JavaScript function get day of the week, right? Very easily. So we will look at the code of this. Another example will be, let's go with this one, weather. In this case, I'm going to use the current location from my device to run a JavaScript function which hits an external web service. And that web service tells me the current temperature and weather exactly where I am. And that's what you got right there. Yeah. In this case, I'm hitting an external web service, but you could also hit ArcGIS services. For example, zip code finder. In this case, we use the location to send a ArcGIS REST API call to a polygon layer. And then we get back a JSON feature, which you can see here in the JSON output. I added this question just so you can see. That's what I get from the server. And then you use pull data at JSON to parse this information and get the zip code. So this way, you can make your forms location aware. You can populate attributes in your features using a special relationship. So I'm going to move around a little bit, hit go, and this again queries and returns a different zip to me. Is that making sense? How many of you think that this location-aware forms business could be useful? Because nobody wants to type the address, nobody wants to type the zip code, right? You can actually do this type of calls today with JavaScript functions. Now, keep in mind that you are making a call to a web service, right? So you have to be online for this particular function to work. Okay.
Oop, wrong one. This one.
So again, some kind of common use cases. You often can query external web services with JavaScript function. In other cases, you can execute complex operations locally with JavaScript. A few words about authoring this type of JavaScript functions in Survey123. First of all, you are going to copy these custom JavaScript functions, these JavaScript files, within the survey directory. Okay? You simply add a new folder called extensions, and you put your JavaScript files in there. As you write this custom JavaScript code, you need to be aware that, one, you cannot use DOM because you are not running within a web browser. You cannot use the common JavaScript frameworks that you might be familiar with. You cannot make asynchronous calls to web services, and you cannot access local files in your device. To invoke your JavaScript functions, you are going to use the pull data XLS form function. And here you can see the syntax. You do pull data as JavaScript, you pass the name of your JavaScript function, the name of your function, and then 1, 2, or as many parameters as your function may require. This is going to return a JSON object, a simple number, or a text string from your JavaScript function. Combining, or to really take advantage of pull data at JavaScript, there are other pull data kind of functions that are going to help you. For example, pull data at JSON. This one is very useful when you are querying Esri web services. Actually, many web services out there are going to give you JSON back. You can use pull data at JSON. And the other one is pull data at property. What properties can be interesting? The token. If you need to query an ArcGIS service that is secure, you can use the pull data at property function to get the token, which you pass to the JavaScript function, right? Other functions like online will return a Boolean. If you are offline, then don't invoke the web service, right? From a using perspective, you have built these JavaScript functions, but can anyone use them? No. To use custom JavaScript functions, you need to be logged in the field app. Okay? If you are sharing a public survey, these JavaScript functions will not execute because it's kind of a security issue. Furthermore, not only you need to be logged in, the JavaScript function needs to be hosted in your own ArcGIS Online organization. So for example, if Erwin creates a survey with a custom JavaScript function, and he invites me to a group in his organization, I work in a separate ArcGIS Online org. Well, I'm logged in, but I belong to another org, so that JavaScript function will not run. Why? Because Erwin could have written a JavaScript function that reads data from my org and steals it from me. So that's why you need to be logged in, and the JavaScript function needs to be in your same org.
And you should never trust Erwin with your JavaScript functions.
Okay, so if you wanted to really get hands-on and build this type of functions, my recommendation would be that you go into the early adopter program. This business of custom JavaScript functions is actually not documented in the help. It's only available in the early adopter program, right here. And you can see here we have this custom pull data at JavaScript functions topic. At the very bottom of this, we just added, literally 2 days ago, these step-by-step exercises. So you are really follow the instructions here, you are not going to get lost. And there are also some sample JavaScript functions that we put together. I'm going to spend maybe 3 minutes going over this authoring experience in Connect.
Take your time.
So here we have Java's Survey123 Connect, and I'm going to have a look at this one. This one is quite simple. So here, if I open my XLS file, you will see now the exact syntax we are using to invoke the JavaScript function. So here is the text question for the day of the week, and in the calculation, you can see it right there. Oops. Calculation, pull data at JavaScript, my JS functions.js, that's the name of the file. Day of the week is the name of the function, and this curly bracket a date is sending the value from my date question. Easy peasy, right? So where is this file, my JavaScript functions.js? Well, go here, directory, and then I find the extensions folder. You need to create this folder, okay? You are not going to find it there by default. You go there, my JS functions, and you open this guy, and that's the function. Simple, isn't it? Let's have a look at another example. In this case, we are going to look at the weather. In the case of the weather example, this one is a little bit more involved. We have one of the questions, you can see here that I'm first calling the web service to get the weather. And the result of this web service call requires, first of all, a token, right, which I already got. So here you can see an example of a JavaScript function that has multiple parameters, right? The location, the token API, as well as an additional parameter that tells me if I am in debug mode or not. But if you look carefully, the output of my JavaScript function is not used directly, like in the previous example. We keep it in a hidden question. Why? Because this is a very long JSON string. And then I use pull data at JSON to extract out of the JSON object weather main. Is that making sense? Very often when you work with these external web services, you are going to get very large responses. That's why I set the length of my hidden question to 5,000. Otherwise, I won't be able to see it. When you are writing these functions, you want to see the JSON string in Connect to analyze and see what's going on, right? Yes, zip code finder. In this one, I'm going to simply open the JavaScript file so you can see it. This is the zip finder. So this is the JavaScript function I'm using to get the URL of an ArcGIS feature layer, the XY location, the fields that I want to retrieve, and then optionally the token and the debug mode. So I'm simply using an XML HTTP request to query that feature layer, and I get back the JSON. The JSON, again, you already know, you use pull data JSON to get the actual attributes that you need for your validation, your calculation, etc. Is that making sense? Do you have any questions? Yes?
Can I use fetch data?
Pardon?
Can I use fetch data, like in ES6?
Fetch data.
An API call.
To do a server request, do you mean? You use XML HTTP request. People here familiar with XML HTTP request, the Java call? So you do that within your function to hit the server, but you just do the synchronous parameter on it.
Right. Yes.
Are there any issues with the order in which things happen? So when they open the form,
Right. That's a great question. Actually, in one of the forms that I demonstrated here, the call to the web service was at the very bottom. Did you see that? And that is all right. You can have the call to the web service at the very bottom and then use calculations at the top. If you are very purist, maybe we should put that at the top, Elvin?
Yeah, maybe. Not necessarily.
Right? Not necessarily. That's a great question. Yes?
Well, just a follow-up to that one. How does it know to do the output first and then process that output?
Right.
Section pull first.
How do you know, Elvin, which one executes first?
You don't. Does it matter?
Well, I mean, how do I know? How does it know to get the JSON from that file once it's done with the first call?
So the way that any expression gets triggered is by a value changing in one of its inputs. So you saw when Ismail had his input parameters, the trigger to calling that function was when that input parameter changed. And that's Survey123 built-in magic.
Right. It's data binding, really.
Exactly.
Yes.
Just to be clear, so any JavaScript you need to log in to run.
For the users to run your JavaScript functions, they have to be logged in. Yeah. And also another trick, when you are creating your own functions in Connect, you often are going to go and tweak the JavaScript file and test again. Right now, with version 3.3, you need to restart Connect every time you change the JavaScript file because it gets cached in the application. So you save the file and then, oh, nothing happens then. You need to restart it.
Maybe we can show you something else with JavaScript functions just to give you a little bit more, a few more ideas. So, who in this room is a GIS professional? Okay, so let's just test this out. What do you call the construct that is the minimum bounding box or bounding object for a number of points? So you got a bunch of points and you want the minimum bounding thing around it. What's that called? What? Hang on, we had envelope. Envelope. Anything else other than envelope? Oh, minimum convex polygon. Oh. Nice work.
Fire.
Right, so how about if we could actually do GIS operations in our JavaScript functions? Oh wow, people are actually doing this. Maybe this is a GIS lesson here. So my problem in my form is that I want to create a polygon that is the minimum bounding convex hull around a bunch of points that I'm collecting. And it maybe, if possible, I'd like to do that actually in the form when it's actually running, not using geoprocessing or Pro or any of that sort of stuff. So let's see if this is possible. So who knows that we've added polygon and polyline support? Well, a few people. For the rest of you, you will be stunned and amazed at this point. So I'm just going to show you in Connect. I'm just going to fire a Connect here. A form, and we're just going to do this in Connect simply to illustrate how this works. My convex hull form. So let's open that up and let's just put that off to one side. And at the same time, we'll open up Excel and let's take a look at what's going on in our form over here. Make that a little bit bigger. So very briefly, we've got polygon and polyline support now coming into Survey123. They're called geotrace and geoshape. Geotrace is a polyline, geoshape is a polygon because it's XLS form speak. So in my very, very, very simple form here, I have two questions of type geoshape, and I've called one hull and one polygon, and we'll see what happens with those guys in a minute. And underneath it, I have a repeat, and in that repeat, all I've got is a geopoint question. So this is bread and butter stuff for all our Survey123 fans out there. Now, in my repeat, I could have other attributes. I could have all sorts of other things going on in my form, but I don't really need them for the purpose of this example. Now, over on the right here, let's just stretch things across a little bit. Where is my calculation? Right, so in my form, you'll see that I'm doing a count of the number of points that are in my repeat. Pretty standard stuff. And the other two that are going on here is I'm doing something interesting. I'm summing the points. So you all use sum to add up numbers or concatenate strings or do things like that. Here, I'm actually doing sum on geometry. So I'm basically stringing together a bunch of points. In the one above, what I'm doing is doing the same thing, but I'm sending the sum to a function. So I'm sending a list of points to a JavaScript function. Now, this is all running in the app. There's no calls to services going on or anything like that. So let's have a look at the form working, and then let's have a quick look at the actual JavaScript code behind it so you just get the idea of it. So the form's pretty simple. I've got a map up the top, and you can see two polygons. Now, we could do a little polygon demo here, but we're not interested in that. We'll just assume that polygons are supported. Down the bottom, I've got a repeat going on. So I'm just going to open this up and create a vertex at that corner, as you can see it, and add that. Nothing much happens because we've only got 1 point. So it's neither a line or a polygon yet. I'll add another repeat here, get a location, and I'm going to put it up here in that corner. Now you can see it's created a line. So it's actually generating a line by summing those 2 points together. And I'm just going to create very quickly a couple of more points here just so that you see them. But what you'll see is that I'm a bad GIS digitizer. I'm not creating them in any particular order, which is, really uncool when it comes to creating polygons, isn't it? So triangle, that's okay so far. And I'm going to create one here. Now things are starting to go bad. Anyone ever seen butterflies in their polygons before? They suck, don't they? So I'm just going to create one more out here, and just to finish it off, just so that you really get it. We'll create one over in Redlands, make it really go crazy. Okay, so what actually happened, we'll delete that last one, I think. There we go. So that repeat, pretty standard behavior. The polygon that you see down the bottom is what happens when you go and string a bunch of points in an order that's not valid for a polygon. So what I wanted was a function that simply took those points and actually did a convex hull so that I could actually ask my field worker maybe to walk to each corner of my boundary, but not in any particular order. But I wanted a valid polygon to come out of it. So as far as my form's concerned, all I had there was a JavaScript function that took a list of points in and gave me a new list of points out that was a valid polygon. So just like Ismail, I'll go into the code, open up the extensions folder. There's a JavaScript file there called JS Hull, convex hull I mean. Let's open it in Visual Studio Code. And there is my function. But the interesting thing here is this is the function I'm actually calling, which takes in an array of points. But in this file, I don't have just one function. I actually have other functions that do stuff. They sort the points, they do the operation and all that stuff. So your JavaScript files don't have to be a simple, few lines of code. They can actually be a full library of stuff. In this case, I could actually have a GIS library, functions that I can actually use within my survey. None of this stuff needs to necessarily make a call to a server. So this, what I was just showing here, would work completely offline. Now that doesn't stop me from calling services, but it just gives you another perspective of what's possible. Is that useful? Oh, there's a clap. Are we clapping because we're happy, or because a guy started clapping, or because we're doing GIS, or we saw code? All of the above.
Self-fixing polygon.
Sorry?
Self-fixing polygon.
There you go. So self-fixing polygons.
I just want to make sure you can't bring in any kinds of libraries.
So you can't, the question is, can I bring in any sort of libraries? Most people say, can I bring in things like Angular or Ember or those sorts of things? No, because those libraries are actually designed to run in a browser. They're not actually a standalone library. The real answer is you can bring in libraries as long as they don't depend on a browser. So if I have a JavaScript library of GIS functionality that doesn't depend on a browser, sure, I can use it. This is actually from a JavaScript GIS library. I just took a few functions out of it. What you can't do is use frameworks and browser-dependent JavaScript functions. That's really the limitation. So hopefully that's given you a few ideas of what's possible with that stuff. So we'll jump back to our slides over here and kind of get back to the story of where we were previous years. Who's been to a couple of these sessions in the last couple of years? Yeah, a few people. And you probably remember that most of our story has been around rebranding the app and modifying the source code. Well, that doesn't go away. So I really wanted to just touch on that very quickly, that story of being able to take the Survey123 source code, which is open source, is something that you can still do. And in actual fact, it's something you still may want to do in conjunction with all of the stuff that we're actually showing you today. We're not going to spend much time on it. I just wanted to kind of recover on it that extensibility story of taking the app code, changing the assets, creating your own branded version of it, maybe even modifying the code, is actually still a valid extensibility story. And some of you have done it, and you can continue to do it. Now, to do that, we've actually got quite a good tutorial about this. Erwin last year would have presented this one. I think he presented it with me. So you can go and find this online. It's one of the posted blogs, and it actually steps you through that process. And the reason that we still wanted to include it in this session today is it still has some relevance as to why you may want to rebrand. But that's kind of the end of really that story. So modifying the source code, just to sort of recap on that one, is still something you may want to do. The reason why is you may still want to fix some of our bugs. Maybe there's still some in there. You may still want to go and modify some of the functionality that's in there. They're all still valid reasons. But the why nots are pretty powerful. Well, keeping up with the change in the code is difficult, particularly if you're modifying it. Getting a grip of all of the changes is difficult from release to release. So maintainability is a problem. So we understand that. We've been listening to that, and we've been trying to come up with a story to actually solve these sorts of problems. We think that JavaScript functions will get a lot of people a lot of functionality that they've been looking for. Is that true? Is JavaScript functions it, and you're just ready to leave the room and go start writing your own? No, there's a couple of people. That guy is. So if JavaScript functions, and we've outlined some of the limitations of JavaScript functions, and they're not necessarily major limitations, they're in fact actually good limitations for a lot of people. If that's still too much of a limitation, what are the alternatives to modifying the code? Well, we've got a new concept coming into Survey123, which is called add-ins. Now, you've had add-ins in Pro and in many of Esri's desktop products. We're now introducing it into Survey123. So, without any further ado, let's look at add-ins. But I don't want to spoil it by actually doing a whole bunch of slides. Why don't we actually have a look at some add-ins working, get a feel for what's possible with them, and then we'll actually talk about how they work and where we're going with them. So, I'm going to switch back to my machine, and what I'm going to do is just switch to Survey. So you're looking at me actually modifying the code in my case, and I'm going to run Survey and point out maybe a few things that look different about it when it starts up. So we're all familiar with the Survey123 gallery. You go, yeah, I've seen that 1 billion times in my life. So a couple of things are different. There's a search bar up the top, and this gets automatically activated now when there's too many things to fit on one page of the gallery screen. So some of you, we know, create a lot of surveys. So the search bar will actually now let you search surveys and filter them. The two other things that, the other thing that you may have noticed here is that some tabs have appeared along the bottom. Now, if you're running version 3.4, the one that's in EAC at the moment, and you don't have any add-ins, Survey will basically look the same as it's always looked. But if the add-in beta functionality is turned on and you've got some add-ins, you actually may see some differences. So one of the things I've got here is I've got two add-ins visible to you on the screen at the moment. There's actually more running at the moment, but two are actually visible. And they've presented themselves as tabs in the UI. So the first one, I just want to give you a little bit of a walkthrough of some of the things that it can do and see what you think of it. So I'm switching to that tab, and it's actually showing me a map. What's a map? And I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and what it lets me see is where my surveys are. Now, I haven't actually gone into a survey. I'm actually just zooming in and out, as you can see. And what it's showing me is where my surveys are, and it's showing me a thumbnail for each one of my surveys. So that's all of the surveys that are on my device, not just one survey. Each one's represented by a little pin with the thumbnail on it for the survey. So and as you can see, I've got some coordinates being shown up the top of the screen. I've got my GPS on and that sort of stuff. If I click on one of these surveys, it actually centers the map to it. It shows me where it is, and it shows me a little pop-up. And I can go straight in and edit that survey. Is that cool? Okay. Whoa. I'm looking for claps, you know. I'm insecure and I need validation in my life, you know. All right, well, let's go and see what else this does. And, you know, it's kind of fun to gloat and play with this thing. So let's play with a couple of other features. But these are things that you can do too. So don't think it's just us. Actually, I don't want to click on that one. I want to click on one over here. So this is this pizza place. I can actually go and show the route to it. So that's, again, showing me the route. I've done the routing inside Survey. I can click on different things in this button down here, and it can zoom to different parts of the map. So this is all going on inside my survey environment. If I click on this thing over here, this tab bar across the top changes and reveals more options. One of them is, if we zoom out a little bit, let's close this guy and zoom in over here. I can change the base map. So I can change my base map to be something different for all my stuff. That's pretty standard stuff. Yeah, we've all seen that before. Big deal. Well, what about if I hit this guy? I can change my map to be in perspective view. So if I've got lots of data around me, I can actually go and see where it is in a perspective view, and I can pan that around and all that sort of stuff. If I've got my GPS on, I can actually make it show that and point in the direction of travel. So I can have it in perspective view or plan view, that map. If I do a route in it, I can actually show that in perspective view. So this is all stuff just going on inside my add-in. Now when I'm here, I can also do things like turn on and off different layers. So I'm looking at all of my inboxes, outboxes, drafts, and that sort of stuff all aggregated together. I can turn different ones off and hide different surveys. Now this functionality is an example of what I've done with this particular add-in. But this is stuff that you can go and modify yourself. So the last bit that I wanted to show you in this particular add-in, and I'll leave it in perspective view, is that I can actually capture new data in here as well. So this blue button down here, when I click on that, it actually pops up all of the surveys that are available to me in my device and lets me maybe fine-tune the location, and I could have that in plan view or perspective view, it doesn't really matter, and then I can start a survey at that location. There you go. So, that's functionality that a lot of people have been looking for and saying, well, we want bits of other applications inside Survey. So that's one of the add-ins. Let's jump over to this tab. This tab is a little bit different. One of the other most popular requests that we've had is we want to be able to see our work assignments inside Survey123. So the most popular story that we give you is use the inbox, create queries, query a feature service, go into a survey, refresh the inbox. That's all still there and it doesn't go away, and it can play with this environment as well. What you're seeing in here is an add-in that's querying workforce assignments in real time. So this add-in every minute polls my workforce feature services as the signed in user. Whoever I'm signed in as in Survey123, it's using its credentials to query. So let's just, so you can see it did a little refresh then. So if I pop over to here, and here's my convex hull algorithm that I was going to show off, I've actually got workforce up and running. So if I was to, let's create a task over here maybe. So let's create a new assignment over here. And we're going to survey something, and that's all good. It's 555. Just do it, man. And I'm going to assign it to this guy. This is my alter ego. Create the assignment. That's all good. Now, we could wait a minute, but because we're impatient, we're just going to hit the refresh button. And you can see down the bottom, it's got the number 7 showing up here. Now, I don't remember what priority we chose, and that should have gone up to 8. Right, so that's just that add-in working live and basically querying the same feature services that Workforce is using, but actually doing that from within the survey environment. Now, once I've got my assignments in here, I can click on one of them. It shows me where it is. It may automatically route. It shows that it's assigned to me, and I can start the survey, all from within Survey123. I can click out of it, and I jump back out, and away we go. So it's basically workforce assignments running inside Survey123. Now that add-in works on all platforms, so that same add-in would work on Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android. So is that cool?
Yeah.
Okay.
Some questions? Questions?
Sorry?
Questions?
We'll do one more. We'll do one more demo because we've actually been using the third add-in the whole time. So the third add-in was a background add-in that runs in background and has just been recording my location and storing it in a database and then sending it to a feature service in online. Now that add-in, I can't actually see it because it's running in background. But in actual fact, if I just pop over here, and I'm just going to have a look at my settings, where are they? Down here. These are different add-ins that I've got running in here. This is my tracking add-in. And this one simply has a configuration, and every add-in can have a configuration. This is the feature service and the interval and distance parameters that add-in's using to record my location, store it in a database, and then send it to a server if I happen to be online. So that's the other type of add-in. Background, or services. It's a service add-in as it's called in here. So there are 3 types of add-ins that we wanted to demo. Do you want to take a few questions, or do we want to go through a little bit of the tech side?
Let's ask them.
Anyone got any questions at this point in time?
Francisco.
When you complete a workforce assignment on here, does it complete it also on workforce, or do you send the go back to the workforce?
Right, so the question here is, when I finish an assignment and I do something to it, does it update Workforce? The answer is yes, it will. This is still a prototype that's in development. It doesn't do everything yet that the app does. But once it's completed, it would do exactly the same thing because all it's doing is updating the same feature service that Workforce is using. So it does the same things as the Workforce app. The difference here is that inside Survey, you can integrate it with other parts of your workflow.
Right. I mean, remember that the idea here is to show you what is possible.
Right.
Right? It's like these are the type of things that you can do when the extensibility framework is out. These are just inspiring examples. You can, in fact, you should be able to take these as a starting point for your own add-ins.
So there's another type of add-in, and we don't have a particularly exciting demo for it, is you've seen 2 types of add-ins, or you've seen one type, not seen the other type and been told about it, and the other type is an add-in that plugs into your gallery. So just like you can have surveys appearing in the gallery, you can actually have add-ins appear as tools in the gallery. But unlike tabs, which start up and run in background, or background services that run all the time, these tools only run when the user clicks on them. So here, for example, I've got one called Super Simple that just shows me this super simple graphic when I click on it. Now those add-ins also can integrate with other add-ins and with other surveys. They may launch surveys and do other things, but the difference is they don't automatically run unless the user starts them. Now to the user, they just look like a survey because they're just an action that the user can actually perform. What they do behind the scenes is completely up to you. They're presented with a thumbnail and a title, but what actually happens from that point onwards is your business.
I mean, this is very critical, right? Because this is basically telling you, you can make Survey123 be whatever you want. You can in fact prevent people from opening surveys unless they go through your screen. In your screen you can ask them questions, you can query services, you can do lots of things and open the surveys under the covers.
Right. So we've shown add-ins here integrating with the UI, but the add-ins can actually hide the UI so that only your add-ins are visible. The surveys may still be there, but you control the flow of surveys. So you may have one survey, launch another survey, come back and do something else.
So could you set up a button like that that would check if you're online, go run JavaScript to go and download tile package?
Good idea. So the gentleman here said, could you actually have an add-in that checks if you're online and download an updated tile package or maybe a CSV file that contains lists? Absolutely. It could be a button that the user presses and they go update my local database and they do it once a day as part of their workflow. Or it could be something that runs every 5 minutes and checks for an update. Now obviously you'd have to think about what's the most appropriate way of doing it based on whatever the workflow is and how big the objects are. But because it's all running inside the Survey123 environment, you don't have to worry about transferring data from another application or to another application. All of the data, the CSV files, the surveys, the tile packages and all that stuff, they're all inside the same application space, which makes a big difference because you don't have to figure out how am I going to transfer data from one application to another. It's all running inside Survey. So we can continue to take questions. What I might do is what's our time like? We've got about 20 minutes. I've got a bunch of slides here. I want to step through some of them. We don't have to go through all of them in detail, but basically talk through maybe some of the technical side of behind the scenes of how this all works. So obviously some of the things that we've already touched on that we wanted to solve is we wanted cross-platform support. We don't want to have to write our add-ins specifically for each platform. We don't care if the user is on iOS or on Android or on Windows or any other platform, as long as it's a platform supported by Survey and you stick to the API guidelines, your add-in should work on every platform, regardless of screen size or platform. Now obviously, if you know that you're running on a specific platform and you're only supporting that platform, you may wish to use tricks on that particular platform and take advantage of it. That's completely up to you. But what we did want was ideally a write once, run everywhere type thinking behind it. We wanted to make it maintainable. So we wanted it so that it was backward compatible every time we go and release new versions of Survey, that these add-ins can continue to work and not go, oh no, they've released another version, everything's broken because they changed all the interfaces and that sort of stuff. So our goal here is to expand the add-in API, but also to maintain compatibility from version to version. So these are some of the problems that we were trying to solve. So let's just sort of recap on what some of the add-in types are and just kind of have a look at it. Now, all of the add-ins that we've looked at today all fall under the category of a tool add-in. And a tool add-in essentially can appear in the system in one of several ways, and you've seen or heard of some of them. You saw add-ins that appeared as tabs that appear along the bottom of the screen. These types of add-ins will automatically load when the app loads. So they'll automatically integrate into that UI space down the bottom. And that add-in can control the behavior of that tab down the bottom. It can have a simple icon, or it can do animation and display other information. Like you saw in that workforce one, it was showing me the number of jobs at the maximum priority. It changed the color and did all that sort of stuff. So every add-in can be designed to work as a tab, but you've got to think about it because they're automatically loaded, they're always running. So you may not want the add-ins all running all of the time, which is why we have tile add-ins. Tile add-ins appear in the gallery, are invoked by the user. So the user pushes a button, they choose the add-in. They don't know it's an add-in, it's just an icon in the gallery, they just click on it. It could be a survey or it could be an add-in. As far as the user's concerned, it's what they're instructed to use as part of their workflow. What you make it do is up to you. The other type is the service mode add-in, and that's the background add-ins that's also, like tabs, start up when the app starts, but there's no UI. So these add-ins are designed to run in background and use timers or whatever mechanism to do whatever they're supposed to do. There is actually a fourth type, which I didn't really bother bringing up there, and that's a hidden tool. And a hidden tool is simply a tool that doesn't appear in the UI at all, and it doesn't automatically start up. It's designed to be used by another add-in. So another add-in may call another add-in to invoke it, but it's not designed to be used directly. So this is, I've kind of shown these already. You saw the add-ins appear down the bottom. They can appear in the gallery up here. And you can see here, you can't tell the difference between which one's a survey and which one's an add-in. And that's intentional. Because as far as the user's concerned, do they really need to know? Do they even care that there's a difference between the two? So we want to give them a simple UI that works for existing surveys and the way that it works now, as well as the way that you extend the environment. Services are a little bit different. There are some hidden ways of being able to actually reveal the background services in the app. And these actually can appear as a separate tab called the Services tab. And you can go in there and see what's actually running in background. This is not really aimed at the user so much. It's aimed for you during the development to be able to see, are your services starting up and running in background and that sort of stuff. So these are the main add-ins that we're working on right now, and they will probably satisfy a lot of people's requirements. There are a couple of other types of add-ins that are also in the works. Another type of add-in, is a control add-in. So the add-ins that you just saw are all about interfacing to the app before surveys start. So they could appear in the gallery, the tab bar, background, but they're not inside the survey itself. We have JavaScript functions inside surveys doing stuff. Another type of add-in will be a control, so that in your XLS form, when you describe a question, you can tell it to use an add-in instead of the default control for that type of question. So you may have text as the input, but you may say add-in equals my funky add-in. And what will happen is that Survey will put in place of the standard control your add-in control. And it will be your business then to take the user input and return a value that the rest of Survey can then put back into the feature. But what actually happens inside that control is up to you. It could be reading a sensor, it could be doing all sorts of different sorts of things. So this is a way where you can extend functionality not only outside of the survey, but inside of the survey. But of course you have to make sure that if you've got a survey using one of your add-ins, that add-in's installed on that same device. Otherwise the survey won't work. Another type of add-in we're looking at bringing in is custom camera ones, so to be able to support special camera types. And for those that don't work with the standard coordinate systems that are in Survey123, being able to support your own coordinate notation. And that's simply an add-in that tells Survey, I know how to convert to a different coordinate system and display it. And so what you would do is provide it a number of functions that Survey will call when it wants to go and show to the user the coordinates in another format that you choose, or that the survey chooses. So behind the scenes of all of this is essentially an architecture where now Survey has an add-in manager inside the system. So you have all of the functionality that Survey has and that we will continue to enhance, plus this hidden guy inside the app that knows how to load your add-ins and bring them into the UI or into different parts of the application as needed. So that's what the add-in manager does. But inside the Survey123 environment, you've got access to all of the functionality of Survey. You've actually got all of the functionality from the App Studio app framework. And you've got a specialized API that's only available from within Survey. So this basically allows you to not only build on top of what we provide out of the box in Survey, but also use all of the functionality that App Studio gives you from the runtime and anything else. And it may not even be functionality that we use ourselves in the app. So really it's a Pandora's box of what's possible. Now, what you choose to do with all that functionality will be up to you. So these add-ins are delivered as a new item type in your organization. So the add-ins will be introduced into online and in Portal from the 10.7 release as a new item type. And there's going to be an authoring experience available to you from within Connect that allows you to manage add-in projects. And if I just switch very quickly to my desktop, just to show you what it looks like. Do I have Connect going? You may have actually noticed that in my version of Connect, I actually had my add-in projects up here. So these are projects that I'm working on that are add-ins. So just like you create surveys, you can actually create add-ins, and there'll be templates for those add-ins that you can build from. What those add-ins go and do will be up to you, but you deploy them as items in your organisation and you share them to people in your organisation through the same sharing model that you use for sharing surveys. So let's go back, check how much time we've got so we don't rattle on too much. I won't spend too much time talking about the authoring experience, but essentially there's a management experience inside Connect for managing projects that are add-ins. There's an IDE, which you use from App Studio for actually editing and creating and debugging. But to actually test your add-ins, you actually use Survey123 itself. Survey123 is your test environment for testing add-ins. For any of you in the room that are App Studio developers, a couple of people using App Framework and maybe the player, think of the player, you can actually Survey123 is your player for add-ins. So I'm not going to spend too much time on these. These slides will be available to you afterwards. But an add-in is essentially a folder that contains a configuration file and source code. That source code represents JavaScript files that contain your business logic and QML files that contain your UI layout and logic. And for those of you that have been developers in App Studio already, this is, if you like a little mini app. But instead of having to write the whole app, you only need to build the bit of app that you're interested in plugging into the Survey123 UI. The Survey123 API gives you a framework to build into the existing user experience, so a way to open pages, to build settings and other sorts of capabilities without you having to reinvent all of the UI. Now, if you want to, your add-in can actually do it all itself. But to simplify development and to speed it up, the add-in actually provides components that actually do things to simplify your life. So there's an API in there that gives you access to the database that's in Survey123 so that you don't have to worry about how to read it, access to the location sensor as it's configured in the app, and a whole bunch of other things. So this is all part of the Survey123 API that's built into Survey123. So I'll let you take a few photos. Like I said, it's got things like access to the location sensor, components for opening pages, methods to open a survey, and all these sorts of things to make life easy inside Survey123 for integrating the functionality of your app. Here's another one talking about other things. There's also components in there that let you make a portal request, an authenticated portal request, without you having to worry about what the portal URL is, or what the token is, or who the current user is. All of that's taken care of for you so that all you have to do is provide the URL to the service you want to hit, and you process the data that comes back. So in cases where people want to be able to retrieve, say, a tile package or something like that that's hosted on their server behind an authenticated credential system, you would use this to go and retrieve that tile package or retrieve a CSV file or maybe issue a query against a feature service and then pull that data down and store it in a local file.
Got a question. You said as an example, I could make it so that the people don't see all the surveys when it starts screen, etc. But I still have to run the plugin to happen. Is there a way to make the plugin mandatory to run? Right.
So the question is it possible to make a plugin mandatory to run and do whatever it needs to do and hide all the other stuff? The answer is we're working on that, definitely. So one of the things we're working on is a way that you can configure what your organizational policy is for Survey. And that organizational policy may cover what is the add-in that must be installed, or what are the surveys that must be installed on your device. Must encryption be turned on, and a few other things. Definitely in the works. It's not all there now, right? So it's something that we're still working on, but that's definitely part of the thinking. So just to finish off on this one, again, another component is the location sensor. So the location sensor is something you can get to directly through the App Studio framework, and it provides you with a lot of stuff to do that. In Survey, there's a simplified interface to that says, just let me use the location sensor as configured and just give me the positions. So you don't need to worry about how to make a Bluetooth connection and discover it and all that other stuff. You can still do all that stuff. But if you just say, I just want the location sensor and get the positions, there's a simplified object. So what we're trying to do is give you these coarse-grained components that make it really easy to build stuff, but also you still keep all the granularity of the underlying framework if you need it for your application. So this is actually the same slide as before. I'll just skip over that one. The tooling behind all of this, because Survey is built on top of App Studio and it's what provides the app framework, the tooling for building add-ins is actually App Studio. So you have to think of as Connect as being your add-in project manager, but App Studio as actually being your tooling for creating add-ins. The difference is you don't have to compile it and create an executable and put it into the App Store. You publish your add-in as an item in your organization. So the final topic is, so how do we deploy them? So we look at this as actually two deployment models. One is the easier one, which is the enterprise deployment model. Add-ins get pushed into your organization as items in your organization that you share using the ArcGIS sharing model. Pretty straightforward. So users can download those add-ins through the UI, and ultimately when we've got organizational policies, they can be pushed down to the device. The other one is a little bit closer to customizing Survey123 with App Studio, and that is when you want to actually bundle the add-ins into the executable itself. So what we've done here is that we've actually made it possible so that you can take the standard Survey123 source code and put your add-ins in a subfolder in that source code. You don't have to modify the source code at all, and simply recompile it as an app. And that app will have those add-ins built in. They don't need to be downloaded by the user. Whenever the user downloads them, they will always be there. And you can combine it with your branding then. So with your branding, maybe the only change that you make, and your add-ins, you can have a completely custom app from Survey123, but not actually touch the survey code itself.
When you say recompile, do you have to use CloudMake for that?
For that, you would use CloudMake, yes. So the process of doing that would be the same as building a standalone app with App Studio, except that you're not actually having to touch the App Studio code, Survey123 code. You're just simply taking the source code and adding your folders, your add-in code, into a specific place and rebuilding the app. So just to kind of recap on these, the enterprise model is pretty straightforward. It's the simplest to deploy. It's cross-platform. It works for every platform, as long as you obviously stick to the rules of the API.
4 minutes.
And is probably the way that we see that most organizations will choose to do it. The second model is really aimed more at MDM deployment. So where we want to actually have very focused builds of Survey, we want them highly maintainable, but we only actually want one installation and we want to push it out to lots of users. So that model, you still have to build the app, the executables for every platform you want to deploy on, obviously because now we're doing a binary distribution. But it's greatly simplified. You don't have to touch the code to actually go and do it. So, finishing up, getting started, everyone's saying, well, so where are we at with all of this stuff? Well, it's being built right now. In actual fact, the beta builds that are in EAC already have most of the functionality that you actually saw today actually already in there. It hasn't been switched on yet for you, but it's actually already in our builds. So over the coming weeks, we're going to be making announcements through EAC, through through the forums and stuff there, basically giving people ideas of how you can get started with it. And with that, is there anything that we haven't told you that you need to know?
Could you use it for something like updating forms or automatically downloading forms and then updating them every 24 hours or something like that? Or every time you open up the app?
I'm not sure if I
If I understand the question is, can I use this technique to update forms within the survey, right? Yeah, I mean, you would run a background or service style add-in to check, is the survey newer in my server than local? If so, download it under the covers. Don't even tell the user, right? You can download the surveys right away. Yeah, great use case, yes. GIS data and lists. I want to update the list in this single choice kind of question, right? You could actually update it, or CSVs that are used by pool data.
Right. Could I refresh the inbox? Yes, you actually have more access to the inbox, in fact all the boxes, than you ever might have thought. You can actually go in and modify the features in the database that Survey is using directly. So that allows you to do things like validation, even possibly have your own logic for populating those boxes, different to ours, if you really wanted to.
You can have policies to auto-upload data. In case that people forget to click on submit, say everything in the outbox, send it up. Yes, Leah.
So this might be something a little more, not really an add-in, but more of a takeaway. Like, say you want to do something like remove the select view and only use the inbox. Is that something where you still have to just go into App Studio?
Right, so I think I understand the nature of your question. You want to be able to take away certain functionality from the app. Well, add-ins are about adding in functionality. So what we're looking at, and this is more part of our enterprise deployment one and organisational policies, is to actually start providing configuration options to turn off more things in the app. So maybe certain things are not allowed to be done that are normally out of the box. We don't have that yet, but that's actually what the organisational policy is about, particularly in people using MDMs where you want to push out a specific configuration to your users that they can't modify. So that's not there yet, but that's definitely in our roadmap.
It's a great enhancement.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you plan to release add-ins to the Survey123 team?
Good question. Do we plan to release add-ins? In actual fact, the add-ins that I show you are the add-ins we're going to actually give you. There's some of them. So for these add-ins, they're going to be available to you as source code, and you'll be able to basically take them as is and deploy them in your organisation if you want to. Or you can go to town and modify them a little bit or a lot. These 3 add-ins will be available to you. There's also another component that we've built, which is kind of a toolkit of reusable bits. So all 3 add-ins that I showed you share some common code. So that toolkit that we're using is also something that's going to be available to you. And hopefully we'll have more than just these 3. But our goal is to give you the source code to every add-in that we produce.
We also expect that you get not only creative, but generous. You create your own add-ins and share them with the community.
Right.
A community of add-ins.
Right. So we hope that our add-ins can be used out of the box, obviously with standard sorts of functionality that Esri has, but also that they inspire you to create your own or at least modify them to do your own things. So with that, thank you very much. I hope that's all been useful to everyone. And
thank you and party.
Maybe, enjoy the party. Thanks very much.